Hello there. Checking on the sound and the video. Everything working out okay? Hello? Can you hear me? How you doing, Brian? Hi, BH. Good, good. Okay, great. Just wanted to check with everyone, making sure everything is working out okay. Good. Okie doke. Let me say a few words about. Um, Hi, Zahid. How you doing? Let me say a few words about the sort of what I'd like to kick around with everyone. And this has to do with sort of I guess it's a technical over a or I technical over choosing something technical versus choosing something with not just uniqueness, but with sort of, I guess, a human skill to it. That's sort of what comes down. I think that everybody was impressed by the announcement the other day that Omega had about they had an adjustable spring for silicon, and I forgot what they called it. But the thing is that people are, oh, that's really neat. And but they talked about the one of the biggest challenges they had was getting it to for mass production. And so I was thinking, that well that was really a challenge, and it certainly was. I have no doubt about that. But then there's sort of like nobody is left. I mean, there's no you don't hear people, you hear more like something that a machine or people got their machines to make. I'll put it that way. Now, there's nothing wrong with machines. I'm not a Luddite or anything like that, but rather where you have something with that a human being did, some skill, some craft to it, versus something that seems to be removed from that. And now I know that you don't want something that was totally done with loving hands at home, so to speak, and that would be and we can't afford something by Roger Smith, and he goes through all of this process, and you see it, and it's really admirable. But a lot of things you can see sort of that somebody was working on your watch and cared about it as opposed to something that was perfectly identical to another million copies of the same thing. And that's what I wanted to kick around today. Um, JJ, John, Jonathan, Owen, how you doing, Owen? Canadian Watch Monkey. Uh, Power of the people, huh? Okay. I got my robot saying power to the machines. So anyhow, um, what I've been doing, I've been reading. There's a book. I'm. Some of you may be familiar with Jena, Jena, a German. I don't know if it's a city or a town right now. At one time, it was a town, but it was the university. There's a university there at the time, or at least at one time when Germany was part of the Holy Roman Empire, which was sort of at loose ends around the turn from the 18th to the 19th century, um, where all kinds of things were happening. The biggest thing in Europe during that period, at least mind wise, was the French Revolution. And in part, the thinking that was going on in America. There was a revolution. And the French threw away a king, and then Napoleon went out and was conquering all these places. So you had a sort of the real revolution of thought going on. And the one of the thinking that came out of this was sort of this, I guess it's a dichotomy between uh, what was once, I guess, considered a self-centered selfishness, but at the same time, what was revolutionary at the time was sort of the notion of the self coming out, which, before you unless you were a duke or a king or something, you really didn't think of that. You were simply part of either a holy entity that was placed where you were, and that's where you were set. And so there were a lot of things that were happening intellectually, and one of the places was happening in Jena. Probably most people know Jena from the famous Napoleonic battle there, but there was also an intellectual center. And so this is, so I've been thinking about these things. I'm sorry, I should be reading something else, but one of the people there, one of the main people at this time, and it was a very short period, like about I don't know, 10 years tops, where they had this center, and one of the major people there was Goethe, and you may know Goethe from the Sorcerer's Apprentice. He wrote that among many other great works. But anyway, so that's how come I've been thinking about this. When I get a watch, I look at my watch, and this is something that is sort of was either pounded out by the millions, or it was something that was a little more special than that. That's one of the reasons why I like to have watches. Well, even these, even this one. This says Jaeger-LeCoultre. Jaeger-LeCoultre. This has got nothing to do with Jaeger-LeCoultre, especially the watchmaker. It's got a lot to do, though, with a guy named Pierre Jacquet, who made this movement, which is Jacquet 736. And to me, the whole thing that's interesting about it was the fact that, well, first of all, it's a shape movement that more than likely was probably taken from an ibauche of an ETA, and then he made a bunch of these shape movements for these, and then he had to go to jail because he was involved in a robbery and all kinds of other stuff. And so that makes it interesting. At least to me, it was interesting. Other ones, of course, the one that a group of us did with under the name Larique is very special because we know every nut and bolt in it and how it was done and so forth. So it's sort of like one type of watch being simply something that was pounded out. It's one of the, what, I don't know, what, 1.5 million Rolexes that come out are 50,000 Patek Philippe's. It's different than, I don't know. I know that FP Journe doesn't make too many. I tell you, a company that you might think makes a lot, but they don't. And that's H. Moser. H. Moser has maybe they make 2,000, 3,000 a year. I don't know. But anyway, there's something about those watches that's different from, I don't know, something, one of my things that was sort of generated in large numbers. Okay, so that's what I wanted to sort of talk about. Now, I know that earlier today we talked about sort of a balance between craftsmanship and accuracy. And of course, for good craftsmanship, we want a watch that's accurate. But the craftsmanship and being able to see it and somehow experience it isn't quite the same as something that is, I don't know, something less than that. All right, so let's see what you guys. I want to get some thinking here. Hi, Tomcat Power. How you doing? Hi, Mark. Donald, Mark again. Oh, we got more Mark. We don't have a limit on Marks today. William, how are you? Hey, John. Okay. Just as in the Middle Ages, you had artisans. Afterwards, there was the Industrial Revolution. We were trying to do a 360-degree turn. Yeah, John, that's an interesting point. One of the things that sort of bothered me about this whole movement was people were looking back, with misty eyes on the Middle Ages. Well, the Middle Ages were not much fun at all. Um, you had a couple things. I think the biggest thing that came out of that was sort of thinking way beyond what was sort of a very tight way of thinking that was controlled by very strong religious beliefs, sort of these uh, strong rulers or despots, if you want, that would only let you think a certain way. A number of people, by the way, who were in the Jenna group got arrested for being, for not being, I don't know, the Duke or the Prince or somebody was mad at them, and they hauled them off to jail. Certainly, when the French uh, uh, hit the Bastille, a lot of the people who were released were simply people who had protested against something. Hi, Ivan. How you doing? Um, Floodland, how are you? Tim, good to see you. Jose, how are you, Jose? Let's see. Okay, so um, Mark, and the Harbrings fall into a special group. Great example, Mark. The Harbrings. If you have a Harbring too, you can think of Richard and Maria Harbring, and they don't make but a few hundred a year in some little Austrian town, and you can almost see them there. And they've been winning. I mean, they've been winning awards for watchmaking for a number of years. I think they've won four Grand Prix awards. That's four more than Rolex, four more than Larique too. So you have a lot of there. It's this kind of thing. The problem is that we deal with is that the small numbers. Um, we had like we had 70 of these that were made. I think if we had opened up a little later, would there have been a lot more than that? But even so, the problem is getting them produced. Agenor had never produced a watch. They produced lots of movements, and they were really good at that, and they were all hand assembled and debugged and whatever they do to them. They had never cased them before, and so what we had done, we had worked with Agenor, and thank God we were going to case them ourselves. What did we know? Um, so we went through this entire process of here's this watchmaker they had, and the guy did nothing but make the watches, case of watches. We had another guy who did this, another guy who did that. Talk to the people making the cases, and they had to have special tools because we had a special case made, and all kinds of stuff like that. So we really came to know our watch and the people who were making it, and which is unusual. I mean, it's been and they turned out with this great watch was something that we had actually asked for. The ones we're working on now, I know that Owen, are you still? Where's Owen? Owen was here. Owen is working on one right now with I guess, working with some other people trying to get some different ideas for Guy Lochet designs and doing these different kinds of things. Now, what I was going to say is that one of the problems is that the good thing about the Industrial Revolution was that you could make things much cheaper, okay? And so more people could afford them. And also at the same time, a lot of people were hired. There's all kinds of interesting things about the history of watchmaking. On the other hand, where you have sort of, I think, as John said, you have the artisan in his little workshop, and he's got his, working away like Geppetto the cobbler or something, making shoes, but instead making watches. That that part probably never was totally true in this, and here's why. What you had instead, you had all, and you still do, all over Switzerland. In our case, was all over Geneva with, I think, the case maker, Rutenlana and Caton was somewhere else. But we knew it. I mean, this is, we became very familiar with it, and we found out, we asked him if the cases were molded or milled. Well, we found out, well, it was almost like insulting them. Like, well, of course they're milled. We wouldn't, you know, what do you think? What do you think we are? Savages? Mold the case? We didn't know. Which was a lot of fun too, not knowing. Uh, Hi Andrew, how you doing? Hey Rancher, good to see you. I think people start at one end, but hopefully end up at the other. Yeah, I don't know. I think right now we're sort of in the throes of, like, what watches do I want to get rid of? Uh, I think I did a pretty good job of getting watches I really wanted in the first place, finding the ones I don't wear anymore. That makes a difference. There was one watch that I got not too long ago. I was just on so many contingencies. We think we make decisions, but I think the contingencies make them for us. Um, and that was this Urban Jurgensen. My God, that watch has turned out to be, it was a good watch. I knew that ahead of time. I didn't realize how good it was. And I've been wearing it. That thing is really amazing. But I know about, I mean, yeah, one of the guys, uh, knowing about the work that Derek Pratt had done on it, and his his role in the work he did at Urban Jurgensen early on and developing a detente escapement. Also, too, that Kari Vouten-Lannon had worked on the watch at some point. There were so many people there that's fun to know about. Um, and the same thing with F.P. Journe. If you look at an F.P. Journe, his involvement and what he did and how he started and so on and so forth. With these other watches, you get you you know about them, but I mean, like, for example, there's knowing Breguet. I think Breguet went through three stages. The first stage, of course, with Abraham Louis Breguet, and then it sort of floundered for a while, and then Daniel Roth, the Chaumet brothers, took over, hired Daniel Roth. He turned the whole thing around, and now I'm sort of wondering about it. Here you have Swatch with it, stuffing silicon hairsprings in it, which to me is like, mm, there's it's sort of, you take away what made it really, I think, special. Um, but that's, don't listen to me. Make up your own mind about everything with watches, because what one person may like doesn't mean everyone will. Okay, let's see. Okay, what's going on here? There's another Mark. Hi, Mark. Pasito, how are you? I know you. It seems modularity is important for most watchmakers, independent of big horse. You're right, Ivan. That's exactly right. What Ivan's talking about, modularity, I don't know if they called it that. Somehow that seems too practical. We'll do it modular, but that's true. Um, in working with Agenor, what they did and their designs and so forth, and how they coordinated things, and of course they had to know how to get exactly what they needed for the movement. I got to tell you, here we had a brand new movement, and I didn't know whether it would work or not. I mean, they put all these things together. I thought, gee whiz, a lot of stuff has to work right. The hairspring, the escapement, the wheel train, the mainspring in a barrel, all of that has to work. And I was hoping, gee, what if they said, hey, give us a call and say, gee, Bill, I'm sorry, that thing didn't work. All the springs sprung out with this new movement we made you guys, but it didn't. And in fact, it works, I think, fantastically well. Um, but that's sort of like going back to this whole issue of you know finding something that's affordable. I mean, that's one thing. The industrialization made everything nice and affordable. The artisan maybe became a planner or a designer, if that, and then the machines took the and we'll take it from here, and off they went. But that doesn't happen either. I think the kind of thing that Ivan mentioned, the modularity part, is there you do get a lot of hands-on. And we had when the design of our watch was such that Wooten, Lannon, and Caton had to get this new kind of, I guess it was a milling or something like that, or polishing device, because they couldn't do it the way they did other cases. And sort of the up and downside. The downside is that it ended up being a very expensive case for us, but one that was totally and wholly unique. So, that's sort of the fun part because we know the story behind it. We know what went into it. Um, you know, it's that part. On the other hand, I there's I don't know, a watch without an interesting story is not as exciting to have, not as interesting to have. Okay, let's get some stuff from you. Hi BH, I don't mind silicon and brands like De Bethune, but putting silicon in legacy brands like Brigade. But De Bethune did more with it. You ought to see. I mean, they have this special like it's not it's I don't think it's a hairspring, is it? Or it's not a regular hairspring. They have something else that they're doing with silicon that was I don't know if it could be done without it, but that's a very different kind of thing. But I see what you mean, BH. Hi, Phoenician cedar. Phoenician cedar, what a great combination. Um, Great name. Some of you guys have fantastic names. Hey, Fast Wong. The De Bethune escapement is so, but not the hairspring. Okay, thanks, Fast Wong. Yeah, that was silicon, right? Um, but theirs is really interesting. What De Bethune has done. Somebody else did. I think I think it was not Urban Jurgensen, but Ulysse Nardin had something like that. They had this funky thing they did with it, and I think they used silicon on that too. But it was a very innovative thing, rather than saying, hairsprings are too hard to make. And instead of having something that Rolex and H. Moser did wonderfully well without using metalloids. So let's see. The interesting thing with Ebel, all their watches are mono block and are serviced through the front of the case. Yes, that is interesting. In other words, they just take the top off here. I've got a watch that I've been working on for over a year, and I had a heck of a time. Let me see at this side. Yeah, that's the back of it, I think. No, this part is the front, and in order to put in the movement, you take the front off, but then I had to do some other stuff. And now I've got to do the thing I like least, and this is because I'm not very coordinated. Thing I like to do least is to attaching the movement to the case properly can be just a pain in the neck. You get this little bitty flat thing, like I don't know, a tab, like a little tab, and then a screw hole in the tab, and you got a screw about the size of a baby mosquito, and you got to put that thing in there, and one thing or the other is going to fly out of it. So, but it's that's one thing too. Everybody ought to, I mean, go to AliExpress or someplace like that, get a bunch of cheap parts that you can put together in a watch and make a watch. It's worth it. It really is. There's a fantastic video by this English guy who's great. He says, "Here's how to do it." He's showing you, and you get a nice big movement like a 64 ETA 6498 or 97, and there's a Chinese version of it made by Siegel. They're great movements, but they act exactly like the 64, 97, 98. So you get some kind of familiarity with it, and you know something about it, so you know something that's going on. Now, there's some of these companies, I mean, like, God knows Rolex doesn't tell anybody what they're doing, but I don't think you got to, making what, 1.5 million watches a year. I don't think you got a bunch of little guys, and putting it together by hand. We know that our entire watch was assembled by hand, first the movement and then the casing, because they didn't have any other way to do it. And that sort of makes it fun. Okay, let's see what you guys have. Yeah, no, Phoenician cedar, um, there are a lot of reasons. I mean, there are many good things about silicon hairsprings. In fact, very good. They're non-magnetic. They're not as affected by heat and cold. Once you get them, I don't know. They come out in these big sheets, just like silicon microprocessor parts. I've worked with those things before, and they come out in these sheets. I always say that they come out of a microwave oven, but it's not a microwave oven. It's some process they have, and they cook them all up, and they bring out these sheets. And I've seen the sheets of silicon hairspring. Making non-silicon hairsprings is much more costly, and to do it right, like Straumann or Rolex, Parachrome, is very costly procedure. I think once you get the concept right with silicon, you can crank those suckers out, like a Xerox machine. But they're better on most things. One of the things was you can't adjust them because of they're fairly brittle. And the thing that was big thing of the other day that Omega came out with, they said, yeah, we figured out a way to do it. And so they can adjust them, which I think is a good thing. But see, the thing is, you want silicon. This thing. This thing is full of silicon, and it keeps great time. I mean, this is what we use to set our watches with. So what do we need the watches for? Because we like the mechanical watches, and there's something about that you start putting these other things in. I mean, like quartz watches kept perfect time. I've had quartz watches. I never thought twice about any quartz watch I ever had being wrong. They were always right. Once they were set, and they were until the battery ran out, and then you had to get those replaced. But I think mechanical watches there's something about them that has a something about them. I don't know what it is, but I know what I like. I hate to say it that way. Hi, Mark. For making so many watches, the Rolex are sure hard to get. Yeah, because there's a huge demand for them. See, the thing about Rolex has this fantastic marketing. But I don't know. To me, they keep talking about their inventor and what a genius he was. Okay, he was a genius at marketing. I'll say that much for him. They had the thing about the gal who swam across the English Channel with a Rolex around her neck. Well, the thing they didn't say, she never made it all the way across. They had to fish her out and put her in a boat. She pooped out. Who wouldn't? She almost made it though. When the Rolex did, that's what they were trying to to have on that. I, I don't know. Oh, let's see. Hi, Euro Nick. Once again, a grateful, grateful. Thank you. Oh, I'm glad you like it. Uh, I don't see how any watch manufacturer since around 1900 can be considered handmade. They're precision machine product. Yeah, there's handmade. There's there's a process. I mean, there's this thing that Tag Heuer was bragging about. They had a machine that put everything together. I mean, using nanotechnology. So you have your own Nick. You got some guy with a machine. If you gave me a machine and said, "Okay, I want you to make something," I'd screw it up because you have to have some kind of skill. The thing that you see, like for example, with engraving, you see some guy with a microscope and or the microscope goes to this giant screen and they can do the etching or whatever they do with that. They don't have to get in there, with a loop and get it all like that. Yeah, there's certainly a lot of machine works and the especially in design. There's computer design. Yeah, I know about that too. But there's a difference when you have a hand um assembly, a hand assembling the movement and so forth. Now, all of the parts that you have, sure, they're going to be machined and they're going to come from specialists. You're going to have one guy that does the gears. I'll tell you how um, specialized it is. Yeah, you know about the rubies that go into. I guess there's two kinds. There's the kind that goes into the. Let me see. There's shaped rubies and round rubies, and different companies make them. Let me see if you can see it here. Ah, you see the little ruby right? Yep, right there, right next to the those. There's several rubies you can see. They call them the jewels. I don't know how many. It's written here somewhere. I'd have to look it up. How many jewels we have? And those jewels, but they're two different companies. One that makes the jewels that go into the uh, I guess chantons, I guess maybe. Um, and then there are the ones that go in that are round, and I don't know, but why? But they're two different companies that make them, so they're highly specialized. And so you have this one because we I had to get one early because we wanted to have one for the Watch Time show in New York back in October, and so they had to do some things that they normally wouldn't do, and they had to do by hand. Now, the thing of it is that if everything is made with a nanotechnology and a computer, you can't do that because it makes them buy the wholesale rather than retail. Rancher, thank you. Frying pan. Oh my God, I went over. I sort of maybe I talked too much over this, with the possible exception of George Daniels and Roger Smith. Yeah, yeah, those guys. Yeah, see old Roger Smith. He gets out there and grinds the gold. He's got like all of these. He has all of these YouTube videos. I think there's 7 of them, just how he makes the case. Really amazing. Okay, let me see what you got here, and then I'll scram. She had a Rolex around her neck, yeah, and a Timex on her wrist. Is that it? Hi, Timmy. See, I love mechanical watches because they are a perfect marriage of design and engineering. Yeah, I think silicon hairsprings have a very good place. I don't, but that's okay. But there's so much to be said for tradition and craftsmanship. Okay, frying pan time. I know. Okay, watch monkey. I'm just trying to get these. I have heard that some watchmakers say that they can be prone to shattering at times, but I don't know if that's true. Yeah, so I know that Roger Smith said that, and he said that here he's got a watch 300 years old and it's still working with transitional metals, and so who knows to that. Okay, Truman, how you doing? Did you know Rolex, Saloxy? Yeah, they have Saloxy, but they chose. That's what I respect so much about Rolex. all of their men's washes, they used a parachrome hairspring. There was one, I think, the Pearl Diver or Pearl Master, they did use a siloxane, and they were one of the triumvirate that went to get to make the hairspring. I'm glad they chose not to. And Swatch Group, yeah, I know the consortium. Um, Maybe that's why Omega invented the new regulating silicon. But Omega is part of Swatch. They're owned by Swatch now. Listen, I think that it's sort of like they really went to a lot of trouble to do what a hairspring can do. A hairspring made out of transitional metal. So if you spend $10 million so you can adjust a spring that you can adjust with a real hairspring, I mean with a transitional metal one. Okay, you got 39 in your Aquaterra. Okay, fast one. I think that this are in theory more long lasting than steel, but there's no 100-year-old. Yeah, I know. They may be. I don't know. I've got all the silicon that I need in my iPhone and computer. Okay, since when they use sapphire? Did I say sapphire? I meant rubies. I have vintage ones with plexiglass. Sapphire is much better. Yeah, yeah. Sapphire glass. They all of that. As soon as they could have handmade, I mean, machine-made sapphire and so forth that were better than plexiglass. Okay, who's the lady behind you with something around her hand? Thanks, Mark. Okay, guys. All right. Thanks for putting up with me for so long today. Take care. See you next week.